I'm no rocket scientist, but I know one when I see one. So this rocket's called Black Arrow, and Black Arrow launched a satellite back in 1971, a long time ago, and this was the only time to date that the UK has launched its own spacecraft. Back in the 1960s, when Black Arrow was being developed, there was really two space powers in the world. There was the Soviet Union, and it was the Soviet Union who launched the very first artificial satellite, Sputnik. And then the United States followed soon after. So those were the two space superpowers. And of course they were playing out the Cold War in space by competing with each other.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The third potential space power was Britain, because we had all the facilities, we had the capabilities, we had the rockets. During the 60s, it was a tumultuous time. It was only a few years after the space race had started, so we were experimenting, we were learning, and that's what the satellite that Black Arrow launched was all about. The satellite was called Prospero, and this was all to help British industry develop a space satellite capability to compete with our European colleagues in France, in Germany, so on and so forth. What do we think of when we're perhaps remembering, in some cases, the space race in the 1960s? Where did this happen? Well, Cape Kennedy, we had the live pictures from Florida showing the launches of the Apollo program. We learnt about the launch site in the Soviet Union. Black Arrow was launched in Australia. Now, why did that happen? Well, Australia is good because it is large, it is dry, and the skies are very clear. So when you're tracking your rocket, you can actually follow it very easily. But where was Black Arrow tested? Well, it wasn't in Australia. It was actually just off the south coast of England on the Isle of Wight. The Isle of Wight had an emplacement made of concrete, and there were two test stands at either end of this concrete service road. And their rockets would be test fired, and they would be grasped extremely firmly because you did not want the rockets to take off. You wanted to see what their engine performance was like, make sure the thrust levels built up. But on no account would those rockets be launched, otherwise you would take out half of Bournemouth. That's enough about the history. Let's go and see how a rocket really works. Space rockets are big. Why are they so big? Well, if you want to put a satellite in orbit around the Earth, you need to be travelling extremely quickly, around about 17,500 miles per hour, which means you need a lot of fuel or propellant, which means you need a lot of tankage, big tanks to put the propellant in. So most of the rockets that we see here is concerned with storing the propellant that is then burned by the engine. The Black Arrow rocket used two propellants. It used kerosene for the fuel, which is fairly commonly used in rockets, and then it used hydrogen peroxide, very concentrated hydrogen peroxide, as a supply of oxygen to burn the fuel in. And when you bring the two together, they can actually spontaneously combust, which means you have to treat particularly the peroxide extremely carefully. It's very unstable and tends to explode if there are any impurities in it. So they were mixed together, and then you would have the combustion and you'd have the thrust building up so the rocket could be launched. Now we can see the engine nozzles. It's a very clever arrangement. If you count them up, you can see that there are 8 in total, arranged in 4 pairs. And actually each pair could swivel, and by varying the combination of the swivelling, you could steer the rocket. The first stage would only work for a few minutes. All the propellants would eventually be exhausted, and that first stage would just fall away. It is no longer any good, it's just dead weight. So that's why it has to go, and then let the second stage take over. The second stage engines fire, and up she continues to go, getting faster and faster and higher and higher. Now Black Arrow, why is it called Black Arrow? Well, it arose from a military program, and there was a time in the UK when the various secret codes were following the rainbow, the colours of the rainbow, at least different colours. So Black Arrow was a kind of inheriting that tradition. But it was actually evolved from another rocket called Black Knight, which was a military rocket. And that was a test vehicle, or a test rocket, for a bigger rocket called Blue Streak. So this was the colour coding system in full swing. So the second stage continues to accelerate the rocket. The nose cone, the fairings which protect the satellite, they fall away. And then eventually its propellants are used up. And at this height, there's a coasting period. The rocket carries on with its satellite on board, but eventually you need the third stage to provide that final boost to get it into orbit. The third stage, which is actually just a small rocket motor, it's called Waxwing, named after the bird, Waxwing. That will eventually fire up and take its satellite payload up to orbital velocity, orbital speed about 17,500 miles per hour. And when that happens, you have your satellite in orbit. And the satellite, which we can see behind my shoulder, is the flight spare of the Prospero satellite that the Black Arrow R3 put Prospero in orbit, and it's still there to this day and will stay in orbit around the Earth for the rest of this century. Black Arrow, why was it cancelled? Because it worked. It actually launched a satellite on the fourth attempt, which is pretty impressive. So just 4 launches before launching a satellite successfully. As we've been used to seeing in recent years, rockets don't always work. They sometimes blow up. So to achieve that was no mean feat at all. Why was it cancelled? Well, the problem was that the satellite type it was launching, it was an experimental satellite. It was to learn more about how to build a satellite that would withstand the harsh environment of space. The problem was too few satellites were being made to justify the retention of the Black Arrow rocket team. So they didn't have enough spacecraft, so the rocket was fine, but there just wasn't the economic justification. And that is why the next satellite in the Black Arrow series, which was called Miranda, should have been launched by Black Arrow. That was the original intention, but was actually launched by an American Scout rocket. So Black Arrow was all about testing the satellites that one day would be part of our telecommunications network. Very interesting program. The only time that the UK had launched its own spacecraft, but maybe we're getting close to the time when we start launching spacecraft again from the United Kingdom itself. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed it, then please like and subscribe to the Science Museum's YouTube channel.